Hello, this is Thomas. Thanks for joining me today. Today we'll be talking about how legacy enterprise communications will adapt to programmable communications. And this is a topic which I've worked on for quite a while. I have a lot of passion for programmable communications, and I hope you enjoy some of these insights. So as a quick note of introduction, I'm currently the Chief Technology Officer for a company called VHT. If you haven't heard of VHT before, I'm willing to bet you haven't worked in a big enterprise contact center in the United States. VHT has a proud history of servicing 250 of the world's leading brands with our enterprise callback solution. We invented enterprise callback 25 years ago, and it's given our team a remarkable opportunity to really understand the dynamics and the experiences of our customers as they've tried to promote their brand and service their customers. So let's go into this. I'm going to structure this talk into three basic parts. The first is, I think it's important to talk about what's happened before today because past is prologue, and it'll give us the right context for understanding what's happening today and what might happen tomorrow. Second, we've seen a lot of disruption in the last year in all of our lives, but also in the contact centers that we work in. I'd like to talk a little bit about what we're seeing and what it might mean. And then finally, I'd like to posit a few opportunities which are coming available, which I think is important for our industry to take a look at and to deal with. So first, let's talk about some mistakes. Let's talk about the mistake we made 100 years ago. So if you were just to go back in time about 100 years, what you'd see is what I would call the 100-year mistake, that people wanted to talk. As we went from the telegraph to the telephone, we assumed that speaking was the most preferred method of communications. Well, for anybody who has actually ever met a child, you would know that if you gave a child a smartphone, the last thing they'd want to do on it is to talk. Now, I'm calling this a mistake not because people don't want to talk, of course they do, but we have a complete infrastructure that we put together assuming that people would rather talk, and that's just not true. This is followed by the 50-year mistake, which is voice is voice. So if you were in our field 50 years ago, what you would see is the digitization of telecom. Prior to that, most of the connections that occurred between voice customers happened either with operators or with rotary dial, right? Rotary dial, and at the time we standardized on a voice infrastructure, and we called each channel a DS0. And we had assumed that voice was voice, and as a carrier, our jobs were to manage the voices that moved around the country. Well, we didn't really anticipate that voice eventually would never be used in isolation. Voice is almost always done in some context. It normally today is coordinated by messaging, which might happen before the call. And we actually have variants of voice now. So voice itself, we had thought was the end application, but now, as we have found out today, voice is much more an ingredient in a larger solution. And so instead of designing it to be integrated with other things, we designed it to be standalone. Voice is hardly ever just voice. Then I would say the mistake we made about 10 years ago was to assume that mobile applications would connect people and businesses. Now, when the iPhone came to market, you might not remember this, but when the iPhone came to market, it came to market without mobile applications, but instead had mobile websites that would be added into the handset. Well, that was quickly replaced by the mobile application, which has become our go-to and de facto way of connecting people and businesses, especially as they're on the go. Well, this was a great idea, except we missed one important point, which was adoption. ComScore will tell you that in any given month, most people do not install any new applications on their smartphone, and it's skewed greatly towards younger people who do install applications. And only a very few social media companies, and the only ones who have done it actually, like Facebook and Google, can claim that the majority of their customers and users have the application installed in their smartphone. I would simply point to any large bank to prove this point. They have an infinite budget to advertise, sell, develop their mobile application. And mobile banking is a killer application for smartphones. Yet there isn't a bank in the world that has their application installed on most of their customer smartphone. The thing which is prohibiting real mobilization of the enterprise is mobile app adoption, not the technology. And that was a big mistake as well. So those three mistakes, the fact that people wanted to talk, that voice was living in isolation, and that mobile applications would be our connector, these set the stage for where we find ourselves today. So as we think about the enterprise, it's easy to think about it as being one big thing, but it's hardly that. And in fact, at VHT, we really think there are two sides to an enterprise. Our traditional place in the enterprise is in the contact center, which is there to support customers, and is now considered a cost center. It costs money. Now, due to the high cost of agents, we are now deeply involved in learning how to automate and to self-serve these customers so that we can reduce those costs. And that's the real driver today of contact centers, somewhere between cost savings and increased customer satisfaction. The other side of the enterprise I want to point out, though, has the opposite issues entirely, the marketing and sales side. See, the marketing and sales job is to create revenue, and that has a very different feel than something that costs money. So in this area, programmable communications exist in service of supporting revenue efforts. But even in this side, it is a weak connection. Most of the money which is spent in telecom in an enterprise is still on the customer support side, not the revenue generation side. What we'll be talking about today does affect both sides, but I think it's important to call out those two important, facets of enterprise communications. So as we talk about the contact center state of the art, there are really three things that come to me that really are the drivers for where we find ourselves. The first is today there's a large push to replicating legacy contact centers in the cloud. And new market entrants like Five9 and InContact and Amazon Connect and Twilio all stand as evidence that the functionalities that were normally found in offers from Avaya and Genesys and Cisco are now being offered in the cloud, and for some pretty particular reasons, not least of which is that the people who it takes, the people like us who make a living in telecom, to manage this contact center equipment are rare and expensive. By placing this equipment up in the cloud, we enjoy all the benefits of hosting by these partners and the cost reduction to us and the quality improvement because it's all these guys do all day. And this replication of the exact same functionality in the contact center generally in the cloud is a big part of what's happening today. But it's not the only thing which is going on. Next thing I think is really a big deal today to keep our eyes on is the fact that enterprises are avoiding voice investments. We're hearing this from a lot of the buyers and managers that we talk to, that the reduction of voice in the enterprise is a priority for them, again, because of cost. And that really it's not a surprise. People are calling less, people are texting more. And one of the things about voice which doesn't apply to messaging is an agent can only talk to one person at a time. A messaging agent can talk to many people at a time. So a messaging agent is remarkably more efficient than a voice agent is. Of course, now I'm not going to tell you that voice is going to go away, and we'll get to that in a little bit, but that really is a driver today in the contact centers of the enterprise. And then finally, the snake oil of 2020 is automations. And we've seen a lot of efforts on 100% automation ideas. A number of our customers have this as their goal, to be able to automate all customer contact. And that's their silver bullet. We don't believe that that's actually going to be a reality for some very particular and kind of hard to move reasons. One of the things that I'll point to as one of the evidences that voice will be here forever. I'd like to just harken back to the 2000s, where a lot of contact centers were moved offshore to save money. And as part of this offshoring effort, lots of money was spent on training agents in foreign countries to pretend that they were in the home market, generally failing at that. But the reason we spent so much money training them was voice is a very personal thing. When you are talking to an agent of a big brand, you're talking to the big brand. So as much as you could make that a familiar experience, the better off it would be for your customer satisfaction. Well, through no one's fault, all of the education that we would provide to offshore contact centers still resulted in an inferior customer service product. And we don't think that automations will be anything different. If you were to name the best computer ever invented, it would be the human brain, and it was built for social conversations and social interaction. That's what we do. If we weren't able to reprogram the best hardware in the world, it seems unlikely to me that anytime soon we'll be able to have automations with the sort of empathy and caring and concern that agents can provide themselves. And that's often done best over voice. So we think it's going to be a place for voice for a very long time to come. So in addition to what's happening there, let's touch on a few other points. First of all, enterprises are turning to data. Data is the differentiator. Many companies can provide similar services, but the things that you know about your customer, the things that you know about your product, really become a great point of competition. Well, one of the issues that we have today is most of the data that we collect from customers is either on our conversations with them, but more often on their customer journey, which often happens on social media. Well, in terms of the enterprise, most big brands really care about their reputations, and nothing can ruin a reputation faster than mishandling customer data. And the intersection of customer data and third parties, especially social media, is probably the least trustworthy way for us to get data from our customers. But it's so important that we're sort of like caught into this scenario where, just like Aesop's fable of the frog and the scorpion. If you haven't heard of that story, I'll tell it really quick. Scorpion comes to a riverbank and says, "Listen, I want to go over the stream," and asks a frog, "Would you carry me over?" And the frog goes, "I'm not carrying you over because once I get halfway across the stream, you'll sting me and I'll die. So why should I do that?" And the scorpion says, "Oh, don't do that. Don't worry about that. I won't sting you because it'll kill both of us. I can't swim." So the frog goes, "Okay, fine." The scorpion jumps on. They go halfway across the stream. And at that point, the scorpion stings the frog. And the frog, as he's dying, says, "Why did you sting me? You're killing both of us." The scorpion says, "Well, I'm sorry. I can't help it. I'm a scorpion. It's what scorpions do." Social media lives on the data it collects. And the data it collects is the foundation of its engine, which is their scorpion DNA. We are right to be distrustful of companies whose business models are to generate data from private conversations. So, what's some of the opportunities that we see coming forward? Now, one big one is on the infrastructure side. And so one of the things I want to point out is our decisions of the past were really built on the idea that because voice was voice, and that's all we had to worry about, all of our telecom infrastructure was built for things that only had voice, like landline telephones. However, the reality is 90% of the callbacks that we get asked for at VHT go to smartphones, which matches the population. Almost all of us in the working world have smartphones, yet all of the communications equipment that we have has been siloed. So one of the opportunities that I see is really remarkable in enterprise communications is to redesign all of our services to leverage voice, texting, cameras, and mobile browsers, not just voice, for customer communications. So as a real direct example of that, if 50 years ago we had to solve the problem, I'd like to talk to an employee of a company, we solved it with voice. You'd call up the company, you'd listen to the prompts, you'd hit the DTMF, and then you'd listen to the prompts, hit some more DTMF, and maybe get the employee you want to talk to. It's not how you would design that today. No one would ever make people get their smartphones out, open their phone app, hit some numbers, listen to what it said, hit some more numbers, and hope to get a hold of an employee. The smartphone solution is simple. You send a text message into the enterprise saying, I want to talk to Joe in accounting. And the next message you see would be Joe from accounting. And what's really critical about this is you didn't have to install the mobile application to provide that service. Joe from accounting can send you a link to your bill. Joe from accounting can send you a message, you can talk to you on the phone. It works beautifully with the average smartphone. And remember, most customers don't install your app. So this is an approach which actually acknowledges the reality of people carrying smartphones and them not installing the application. So the infrastructure, I believe, is a remarkable opportunity for programmable communications. And as I just touched on before, data privacy and security is another great opportunity we have in programmable communications. So the mistake that we're making is that social media is the enterprise data play, and we're making it because there's no other opportunity. As we look to get communication paths into our customers, we have to think about social communications, social media, because that's what's there. But I'll say it again, data privacy and security is supported by the business models of telecom carriers. We have laws and regulations you can go to jail for illegally wiretapping. The data has a very different idea inside regulated industries. So if you're especially if you are in banking, finance, healthcare, government, security, military, any place that's regulated, the carriers are your friend. This is where your data ought to be going because their job is to carry the data from point A to point B securely and privately, which matches perfectly with the enterprise data concerns. And then finally, let's talk about CPass. So I think CPass, when we first came to it, was a great evolution. For those of you who are as old as I am, you know that CPass was not our first offer. In fact, we can go back in time and remember companies like Dialogic and programmable switch companies like Excel. Using communications as a platform for programming is an old idea. And CPass allowed us to do this now in the world of the web. But the problem is that it's really too simple for the problem at hand. The real core of a CPass is to be able to send a text message, to connect phone calls, to play a prompt. But the real problem is not there. The real problem is one level up. CPass was worrying about one little, communication transaction at a time. But the real problem is in the conversation. And the conversation is actually where the data is collected. You'll notice that the current CPass offers of today aren't data fluent. They aren't designed to collect amounts of data and then put that data into third-party systems. Instead, they allow the application to do it. So I'm predicting that CPasses will grow up. They'll grow up the stack and be more conversation and session oriented. They'll be more around data, more around the collection of data from customers, because that's the really important thing. And that's the kind of tool that we need. We're stuck today with slingshots, but we've got a battle on, and slingshots can only go 5 feet. We have a much harder problem in front of us to really connect up business process, workflow, prospective customers, and support. That requires a CPass which is much more, beefy than the ones we can offer today. So that's where I think programmable communications is and where it's going to go. On behalf of myself and all of my fellow employees at VHT from Akron, Ohio, thank you for spending some time with me. Take care.